you ever wonder what happened to my knee? I'll tell you right after this.
What's happening, weight loss warriors? So this week I did a poll on Facebook to figure out which topic you guys wanted, and what happened to my knee ended up winning by one vote. I think 21-20 was the total there. So I figured I'd go in there and do a video about both because I had such a good response, and I want to make sure you guys get what you want. So with the knee, what actually happened was, for those of you that don't know, I was a wrestler in high school, and I started coaching right after high school. And I was in a wrestling club in the off season called the Peninsula Wrestling Association, or PWA. Shout out to all the PWA family that are watching now. And we were at practice one day working out, and practice was wrapping up, and we had an 8th grader that was getting ready to go out and wrestle in a freestyle tournament. And we were working on a low single technique with him, which is a wrestling technique. And after a while, my buddy Ricky Pierce was working with him, and I went to take a shower, and I was sitting on the benches getting ready to leave, and Ricky said, "Hey, I think if he gets 5 more low singles in, he'll be able to do the finish we're working on. So if you'll just give him some realistic feedback and let him shoot on you, while I go take a shower, we'll get out of here." So I got off the bench. I was a little bit cold. My muscles had all cooled off, and the kid shot a low single, first one. And when I went to defend it, my knee just popped. And so Ricky took me to the hospital, and there they had said, obviously I needed to see an orthopedist. And after the MRI and everything came back, I had torn my ACL. So I went in for standard ACL surgery. Basically was 20 years old, and they looked in, and they went in and they did the surgery. They said everything went well. The doctor told me at that point that I'd suffer about 10 days of misery. And so to me, misery, being a wrestler, being a wrestling coach, misery was totally miserable. Anybody that's done the sport of wrestling will be quick to tell you that we go through some grueling, tough stuff. So I was prepared for the absolute worst. I got released from the hospital the day of surgery. Went home, went to my first rehab. I was totally killing it. I was doing straight leg raises. The very next day after surgery, the physical therapist was like, "Wow, you're going to bounce right back from this. You'll be back in no time." And the next time I had therapy, I had to wait a day. I went in, and I was struggling. I couldn't pick my leg up. I hadn't peed in a couple of days. It was a real struggle, and everything wasn't going well at all. And so I grinded through that, and grinded through another day and another day and another day. And I can remember I lived in an apartment, and the upstairs part of the apartment was where I slept, and the downstairs part is where my food was and all that. So I was downstairs in the beginning, and I can remember crawling up the stairs so that I could pee, and just dribbling 2 drops of pee out and feeling like I had to go so bad. It was such a struggle. And so after, I don't know, a while, I went to therapy. It was probably 5 days in, 6 days in. I went to therapy, and I couldn't even move. And the therapist was like, "You need to go home and rest, and something's happening." So I called my dad, and I said, "I don't even know if I can drive home." And he called my grandmom, and she picked me up and took me to her place. And I stayed the night there. And that night, I remember her trying to get me to eat, and I wouldn't eat anything. So she was like, "Here's some ice cream." And I didn't even want the ice cream, and I was barely touching it. My leg was killing me. It was so hard. I couldn't pee. I was so frustrated. And I talked to my dad, and he had talked to one of his buddies at the VA hospital. And they said that if my leg had gotten red or all these different things, that we should be concerned. But it wasn't feeling a lot of that. But it was hard as a rock. And so when my dad touched my muscle, he said, "Yeah, that's one of the signs that this could be some kind of an infection. Let's go back." So we went back in to see my doctor. At that time, my doctor had gone to Florida. And so we saw his partner. And it took his partner 2 seconds. He grabbed the wound, and he squeezed it together, and pus just flew out of my wound. And he was like, "We need to rush you to the emergency room right now. You need as much help as possible." So he got on the phone with my doctor in Florida, And that guy, he got right on a plane and flew back. And that, 3-4 hours later, I was in surgery with his partner, and then my doctor eventually came in. I'm allergic to penicillin, so they rushed every non-penicillic antibiotic they could through my knee to clean it. They put me on a PICC line. They started with, I believe they started with vancomycin immediately, and there I was in the hospital. And so while I was in the hospital, they were looking to get peaks and troughs in a certain range, and I was not hitting them. I was not peaking as high as they wanted, and my troughs weren't going as low as they wanted, so they were seriously concerned, and they were talking about amputating my leg because we were 5 or 6 days in at that point, and it wasn't getting any better at all. And the infectious disease doctors were trying to figure out what it was, and there were just big issues all over the place. So my dad was a pharmacist. He recommended taking me off of vancomycin and putting me on ancefrin. And ancefrin is a cousin of penicillin, so the doctors were reluctant to give me the ancefrin. But eventually they decided, you know what, we have nothing else to try. We'll go ahead and give it a couple of days and then amputate. And so when they put me on ancefrin, I immediately started to hit my peaks, and they were really excited. And the process of starting to clear up the infection started then. But I was in the hospital for 17 total days with that infection. And when I went home from the hospital, I had a PICC line in my arm and went straight through to my heart, and I had a fanny pack, which I wore all the time. I had a catheter in because I couldn't pee. There was just all kinds of issues. But in that process, I ended up staying 6 months on the antibiotics. That's how long it was to fully clear it up. I couldn't walk that period of time, and the hole in my knee was so big that we actually had to get plastic surgeons in to, they stuck this little machine in there where they had almost like a sponge, and it sucked the capillaries back up and filled in the hole that was in my knee, which you couldn't even tell today, but it did do that. But you're going through this at 20 years old. It ate all of the cartilage out of my knee. And I was left basically at bone on bone when I finally got it together and back up. And I didn't take it too easy right off the bat. I was really into physical fitness. I was working out every day. I was wrestling every day. And so I continued to do that. And so I did that for a little bit once I had gotten myself back together. And started coaching Minchville High School, got my first head coaching job at 21 years old. And I was wrestling with those kids a little bit. And it just got worse and worse and worse to a point where I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't really wrestle anymore. I couldn't really bend it anymore. I went in and had it cleaned out. I think I had it washed out, I think 3 times after the ACL reconstruction. So a total of 4 surgeries there. And then after that, I had it cleaned 2 more times. And then I had it cleaned, I think, another 5 years later. And then recently I went in and I had a knee replacement when we first moved to Williamsburg in 2012. And the reason for that replacement is actually I was walking on the treadmill and losing weight, and my knee was just absolutely killing me. So I figured if I got it replaced, maybe I could get back into walking a little bit more. And it just seemed to not work out. That replacement happened in 2012. So then 2013 or 2014, I went back in and I got my patella replaced too, because the doctor said he thought that was the reason that I was still in so much pain, because the knee replacement just wasn't sticking. It wasn't any better than it was beforehand. And after the patella replacement, it still didn't get any better. So I was in a lot of pain and I was struggling. And so, of course, all of those things over the course of 20 years balloon your weight up and put you into situations where you can't be active and you can't exercise. And then this last spring, I went to see another doctor, Dr. Sapathia, out at VCU. And he said that I needed to have my shin broken and I needed all these other things and to replace the replacement. And it sounded like a bunch of complicated stuff, but I was so glad that I had the courage enough to go through that, because it really was life-changing. I was already losing a bunch of weight, and I think intermittent fasting would have got my weight down regardless. But he gave me the ability to walk again. He gave me the ability to stand without pain, to be able to coach again, and move around all day and not feel like I have to sit, and not worry so much at all times about, is there adequate seating? Can I sit down? Is my leg going to hurt? And I can be able to make it as much as, the Ram Rumble the other day. I'm sure some of you saw the picture on social media where I walked 37,000 steps. That would have never been possible if it wasn't for the latest knee replacement. So basically, just bad luck is what happened to the knee. Ultimately speaking, there's always a chance of infection. It ended up being a staph infection. That's what the knee infection was. And this is before staph infections were really known. You know, this is in the year 2000. We're in 2019 now. We know an awful lot about staph infections now, but we didn't really know it. And then on top of not knowing it, trying to treat it and treating it with an antibiotic that was not helping me only made it worse and compound the issue. So, and then, you know, being young and dumb and not accepting the fact that you need to slow down and that your knee is hurt and that you need to let it heal a little bit and continuing to try to be the same person I was prior to the injury. All of those things combined to really ruin the knee. But, you know, I've got it back now. It's not 100%. It doesn't bend well. I'm going back in Monday to see if they can do anything about that, if we can get some bend back into it. But even if it never bends well again, I at least now know that I can walk, I can be able to do some of the things that I couldn't do before, and I'll be able to move forward, you know, with a better situation than I was before. And I guess the big thing to take out of it is that there is no reason to not get going, and that even though I had all those obstacles, I still, even before the surgery happened, I had already lost 50 pounds using intermittent fasting before he even cut me with the knife. So, and then I've lost another, you know, 60 or so since then. But I was on the way to losing weight before the injury, and that you can do it by diet. And diet isn't even the right word. You can do it by changing the way that you eat and the time that you eat in and getting into a time-restricted window and using intermittent fasting. And basically, no matter what obstacles there are for you, you can achieve them. You just have to hang in there. So if you like this video, if you learned something, please give me a thumb up and subscribe. Turn your notifications on. Remember that I'm here for you, weight loss warriors, and you just keep on plugging away. Thank you.